Kia ora everyone, no mai anō, welcome back. We've got a quorum here and Sam's online, so that's all good. Next up we have our Intangible Heritage Grant Fund applications. This is the first set of the Intangible Heritage Grants. And so what I'll get staff to do is just give us a quick rundown on what that really means, and then we'll move to questions.
Kia ora koutou. Intangible heritage grants are a means by which we can really recognise and celebrate the diversity of the communities that make up Christchurch, Ōtautahi Christchurch now, and that have in the past. They came about as a result of the heritage strategy engagement that we did with the communities across the district, who told us that they didn't want heritage to just focus on buildings and places and objects, that it had to include stories, memories, things that give us our identity, our sense of place, our culture, and that connect us. And from that, we took the image of the rope, and that each of us has our own heritage story or stories, and these together are strands that we weave. And as we weave them, we tell this wonderful story that is heritage. And as time goes on, different groups, different communities add their stories to the rope, and it gets longer and broader. And if we look out 20, 30 years into the future to what we want this city to be, we do want it to be a city that is known across the world for inclusivity, diversity, and giving everybody a chance to tell their stories and have their spaces. These three grants have come from applicants really early on in the process, and they have all had to be very patient with us while we work through the guidelines. The first I'd like to present to you is for Team Hutchinson Ford, which is some interpretation panels that tell the story of our city. The Ford's building is such a key landmark where it sits, and as part of the redevelopment of the city and the plan following the earthquakes, a lane was carved through between the heritage building, which is the workshop, and their forecourt. That laneway is a greenway, and it's set to try and attract people to the area and create something of a unique sense of place and identity, a bit of quirkiness that makes Christchurch special as we rebuilt. Part of that process for the laneways required Otakaro Limited, the City Council and the Matapopuri Trust to pull together a wayfinder trail which told stories around the city and got visitors as well as residents to rediscover the new rebuilt city and to find different places. We were really lucky that at the same time that this Wayfinders Trail was being developed, Team Hutchinson Ford decided they wanted to invest $65,000 on top of the $2.5 million that they're having to do in order to create this laneway, and also some very significant conservation and upgrade works on their scheduled heritage building. And they wanted to put some interpretation panels along that laneway to give it a presence and an identity and to make it somewhere that people would come to. They've got 5 panels planned that tell the story of Cecil Wood, who's the architect. And he's really important because he is one of the most prominent architects in Christchurch, public trust building, St Barnabas in Fendleton. And he was actually employed by the Ford family to build them a workshop at a time when cars were fairly new to the city. We were losing the horses and moving into cars. So the fact they chose a prominent architect to design this building shows how important it was at the time, and it's still there now as a landmark. They also want to tell the story of the motor car and how it's changed Christchurch over time, as well as how the car has changed. They do want to talk about their family and the fact that that family has been associated with the site since the 1920s. And the whole of Art Deco Christchurch and the facade on to St Asaph Street with its Art Deco. 2 of those panels that they were planning to do were ones that had already been identified as part of the council's internal strategy for the Wayfinder Trail. So council had already identified a need for 2 of these panels and put budget aside for the creation and the development of them. So if we were to approve a grant to Ford, that would enable these 2 panels to be created and incentivise them to put the other 3 panels up. and council would no longer need to provide those 2 panels themselves. So it's a really good opportunity for a partnership along there. Do you want to debate one and then move on to the next, or?
See if there's any questions on this one first. My first one is that if council's already got budget aside to develop 2 panels, why would we give a grant out of grant funding to someone else? And are they different when it comes to OPEX and CAPEX?
My understanding is that the panels that we would get will be bigger. They will have a wider range, and also we would get more than we would have covered ourselves. Also, if we were to fund it that way, then we don't have any ongoing maintenance and operational costs associated with it. They would sit with the building's owners.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Just on this one to start with. Yanni?
Is the government, I mean, this is part of the sort of government central city plan, South Frame, which is there any support from that, given that there was an arts trail budget, as I understood, that we tried to get some money put towards, but I'm not sure what happened.
My understanding is that at this time, Otakaro, who are the other partners in it, haven't got funding to put into that, which was why the council had identified it on their Wayfinders Trail as needing some interpretation of that salt district. So we would get 5 panels that would tell the story rather than the 2 we'd originally budgeted for.
And also the cost seems really high. Like, how do we justify that sort of level of expenditure? Like, it seems very expensive.
Sorry, do we have any guidance on sort of interpretation panel?
I've got details of how they break down. A large amount of the money is the research and the writing, copyright use for the materials and the photographs, etc. As I said, they're very large. They're 6 meters square each. And the 6th panel is actually a special glazed box which will contain artifacts that they found on the site during the works to create the laneway, with archaeological interpretation in there. They'll also be lit so that laneway has got some lighting and it serves as an attraction after dark and at night.
Great, thank you very much. Any further questions on this one?
I want to check, I'm just sort of trying to understand in terms of the laneway. Is that a public laneway? Is that open during the night or 24/7, or is it just?
It's fully accessible public laneway.
Right, because in the photos that we've got, it kind of looks like a private kind of walkthrough.
No, it's a public. It's South Frame.
Yes.
Yeah, so it'll be 24/7.
Yes.
Right, and how resilient will these things be? I mean, given that we've had problems with vandalism of artwork in the city, they look quite susceptible to vandalism.
They seem to have gone to quite a lot of effort to make sure that they've got high quality stainless steel frames in there, and that they've got the anti-graffiti, scratch resistant glass, etc.
Okay.
Right, and are there any further questions?
Well, one thing about that is that they are part of the building, so they're not standalone items which are more susceptible. They are part of a building, which will be therefore occupied at times and will be maintained as part of the building. So they're not standalone items.
Yeah, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you. So the original intention was to produce 5 panels. We're funding 2 of them. Does that mean the result will be 5 panels, 2 of which we fund, or does that mean the result will be 2 panels? Like, are they still intending doing the whole 5 and they'll
They
get
have
the
got
funding
the
from
plan
elsewhere?
for the 5 panels and the box.
Okay, so it'll be 5 and we're funding 2.
Yes, it will be basically a partnership with council and the company there to celebrate. And they're not looking at promoting themselves and their business per se. They're looking at the whole history of the Ford motor car. The family are important because without that family, we wouldn't still have them on the site. It is that family connection, and that really is part of the story of that area. But yes, we would fund 2 to get 5 and the box.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so if we've no more questions on that one, we'll move on to the next one.
Okay, so
The quick overview, and then we'll go to questions.
the next one that one is the sorry, just get the
The old tufty.
so this one is for the Our Stories Project Trust with Otafiti Unlimited School. The students at the school have been looking at NCA history curriculum, and part of their curriculum for the history is to pick an event which is of significance to New Zealanders. The students there have picked on the Springbok tour because of the 40th anniversary coming up this year, and because of the massive impact that it has had to New Zealand and New Zealanders over time. They have reached out to the trust to work with them to help them develop an oral history project to gather stories of people who were around at the time of the tour, either as adults or as children, and for those to be curated and turned into a digital app as well as a website, and for the stories that they gather to be put into the City Council Libraries archives. They will be creating a tool that is specifically designed by young people for young people. So they'll be asking the questions that are the questions that they want to know. They'll be asking, how did this affect you? Why did this affect you? From their own perspective, rather than just taking a recorded history that's available now. I have 2 children who have gone through this particular question in their NCA history, and it's actually really hard to find perspectives that they can relate to. So it will be a resource that will be open not just for that school, but also for other schools and other students to use as part of their NCA curriculum. It's $25,000, which equates to $1,000 each of the 25 students who will be doing the interviews and getting the extra training and skilling that they may need to go on in the future, perhaps to work in this area.
Can I just check before other questions? One thing that we generally don't fund at council is work that is school curriculum based, and so this is part of the NCA curriculum. In what way is the current project over and above the actual curriculum work?
Oh, it's definitely more than that. I mean, it will be a resource that will be available on libraries for students to use, but they're also creating a tour. So they want to place-base a lot of these stories so that students and other people can look at the app, and you can actually go out to the particular place and hear interviews with people who have been there. They will be working with Ngātonga Sound and Vision, perhaps, to get some sound recordings of the protests at the time. So they'll be creating their own website and their own tour that takes you around to these places that will have other uses. But it is also a tour for people who want to come and follow either rugby enthusiasts or people who are really interested in the political history of this area.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll just ask the really obvious question. Will John Minto be involved with the students in the project, given that he's almost world famous for this and he lives in the city?
I haven't been able to ask too much about who they're interviewing. I know that they're looking at creating a list, so I can't imagine they wouldn't be reaching out to John Minto.
Yeah.
But I haven't been given a list of these are the people we'll be interviewing because the students are leading it. It will be also down to the students to decide who they want to interview as well, rather than us necessarily prescribing it.
Right, are there any further actual questions, Jimmy? And then Tim.
Except the Unlimited Discovery School, how about the wider school community, whether they have applied for funding or where about, or from some other source of funding regarding to, to have this audio, the memory, I mean, because you mentioned this expansion to wider the school community.
So the wider school community will be involved. It's 25 students that it is their project. For the wider school community will be involved around perhaps doing some research or promotion. As far as I know, this is stage 1. And once they've curated this and they've got the resource there, then there'll be opportunities for other students in the school to perhaps pick up the resource and do other things with it. But it's because the students are designing it, where they want to take it next and what other opportunities there may be to develop on it. I'm not sure. I know that as a pilot project, they're looking at putting in place some guidance and guidelines from this that will be available for other schools who want to take up their own project, or for other community groups or young people to say, we did this, here's the platform, here's how we did it. If you want to set it up, follow this model, and you can put it on the SmartView and the Christchurch NZ apps afterwards.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, I look, thank you very much for this. And yeah, I was around at the time. I'm so old, so I do remember it. And the battle at the gasworks, etc. But with regards to the balance of history, is this history is always written by the winners, irrelevant of what you think the winners are, and etc. So I'm just wondering if you're going to do something. What's the guarantee of a fairness of views?
2 points on that. One is that yes, history is always written with different perspectives, because it's, there's the number 6. Well, is it a 6 or is it a 9? It depends where you're standing, and we can both be right. This is part of gathering the strands. So we're not saying that every strand has to have one perspective only, but we're not saying every strand has to cover multiple perspectives. My understanding is the student want to interview people who were young people at the time. They're very, very keen to interview rugby players who were actually on the field at the time. They're also keen to make sure that they include the impact on Māori and the Māori rights movement, and how that's had an impact looking back now 40 years on, and what that's done there. And I know that one of the stories they wanted to follow up is from some young people at the time who went then out to play rugby on their local rugby fields and found that it was covered with smashed bottles and glass, and how that affected the young people at the time, so how it felt to be young. So I would imagine that they're going to be asking questions that represent what younger people nowadays want to know about the tour, to supplement what they can already find out. So it'll be more enriching what we've got than necessarily being a complete overview that's fully balanced.
Tim, if it helps, my daughter's been through the Springbok tour thing for NCA, and the guide for it is evidence about the 1981 Springbok tour of New Zealand. Comprehensive understanding of different perspectives is shown in the communication and stuff. So it's looking at the whole. Yeah.
And with regards to the earlier question about NCA and its 5.16, the students are also learning editing, etc. So is this what this fund is that's included in this fund? So it's not just about, it's a fairly ambiguous kind of title, isn't it, for the fund?
Yeah, the fund is covering the professionals who do that work, but rather than the professionals going out and doing the interviews, that they are training the children, the young people, on how to do the interviews. Rather than the professionals handling the materials and the recording equipment and learning and downloading it themselves, they're taking the students with them to do it. So the payment goes to the professional company who will be producing it, but they will be working with the students, so the students have an experience to get a mentorship type experience on how to do it with them.
And my final question, which will also be a question for the next one, is Smart Cities came to us and they gave us a big spiel, and it was really fantastic about, you can go around our city with your phone and just listen to, and have spots that you could listen to parts of history, etc. Is that going to, is there a link between our future planning for council?
Yes, because Chris Herbert, who is the Our Stories project coordinator for this project, is the lady who would have come to see you to show you the smart cities, and actually on the report you can see her there holding her phone up with the app on it. There. So that is actually Chris. So it will be on smart cities, as well as in the libraries.
Thank you.
Any further questions on that one before we move on to Storytown? No. So a quick rundown on Storytown.
Okay, they'd be bored of me by now. Storytown is a project which has got a huge amount of opportunity to be utilised in the future. It's starting small in the central city, and they are looking at identifying some of the lesser known places around the city which have got stories and heritage associated with them. So they might be looking at things like park benches, or they might be looking at things like lampposts or hitching posts, or sites where things used to be. And they will be putting, they'll be putting QR codes down on those spaces, and by scanning the QR code you can access between 5 and 10 stories that are associated with that place. They're looking at making sure the stories they tell are really diverse and far-reaching, so they may have a piece of literature because they started off as a literary group, and they're now spreading more into heritage. So it might be there's literature, it might be that there's a sound recording, it could be that there's a song that's associated with a particular building, it could be the heritage story, it could be someone's own personal memories of that place. They're working with Ngaitahu Archives to actually start building a repository together of different stories so that it will combine both the stories. And they're also looking at working with some of our other community groups. I'm working separately with some other migrant communities for them to be included in the project to upload their stories of different places. So it will be very much place-based and very much about diversity of stories. It's starting, as I said, in the central city, but the template is then, if it works, to take that as a model out to other areas and other community groups so that different communities can say, this is my neighbourhood, this is what's important to me in my neighbourhood, and then we can start encouraging other people to gather their stories. So it starts as a depository for existing stories, but with the capacity to start gathering future collections.
Great, thank you. Pauline had a question, and Tim.
I mean, I'm getting a bit of deja vu. Did someone not already pilot this a few years ago? Do you know?
Storytown have done it with literature before, so there have been some with literature. This one is looking specifically at trying to weave together in one place multiple different histories from multiple different groups across the city around that sort of inclusivity conversation.
Right. And they'll manage to cobble together the rest of the funding required?
Yes, they've already, if it's on here, they've already got $10,000 pro bono, and they've gone to RATA as well. And they've also got interest, should the pilot be successful, they've got interest from the Ministry of Culture and Heritage for investment through their innovation fund to take the project out further on. So this would be seeding something that would then move on. And they're looking at, if it works, the model from Christchurch actually going out to other cities across.
Well, I was going to say, is this a first for New Zealand?
This is
the
model of using QR codes to tell stories and to link to a website is not new, no. But this way of using it to tell multiple layers of heritage from one place and to bring in different things on a website is, I believe, fairly new. They've also, I said, got it backed up with this great New Zealand map. So the plan is further down the line that the map, as Storytown or other people become involved, the map can then cross-link. So you can have people in Auckland who have a story that was written by somebody in Auckland who came from Christchurch, so it can link back. So they want to take it out much bigger, but they're starting in the central city.
That's great.
So when will it be deliverable?
Sorry?
When will they get it off the ground?
They hoped to have launched it during the Word Festival.
So it's ready to go.
It's largely ready to go. They've got a number of the places. What they haven't necessarily got yet in there is the diversity of stories, so they might only have one per place. And they also want to be working with communities to find out some of the hidden stories and which are the places to put them, because otherwise they'll only tell the stories we already know.
Yeah, I think we need to move on though. So Tim, a question from you.
So I just say we should get it onto the newsline when it launches. It'd be fantastic.
I guess, like any large organisation, sometimes they're disjointed and don't talk, and we get those sadly all the time. So with this and the previous one, the apps, the programs, etc., that they're going to be using, I would hope that they are linked in with the museum and library and be cross-pollinated as well.
Oh, they'll all sit. All the material from all of them will sit in Christchurch City Libraries. everything comes to our city library. So it can go on the Gibson wall. It will be available for our libraries and for complete public access and complete community use.
So the programs that they are using, or the apps they're creating, the library is happy with those, and smart cities would be included in that as well.
They're all compatible. I don't know the exact jargon, but the platforms can all speak to each other.
I think we need to move on though. So we've heard lots of good detail about each of those three applications now. Do I have a mover for those? Melanie, and a seconder for Pauline. Do I have any debate? Yanni.
Yeah, can I just ask that you put the first one separate?
Yep, that's fine.
I mean, while I just want to acknowledge that, this is important. I think also to acknowledge that the south frame is actually not what we thought we were getting, and Otakaro and Sarah and CCDU basically should actually be funding these sorts of things. They put money available for, as I understand it, an arts trail. This council has previously asked if some of that money, I think it was 10 million, could be made available for this sort of activity. And to me, it just doesn't seem right that we're funding this. So, I like what they're doing, but I do think we actually do need Otakaro to fund this fully, given that we were supposed to have a campus-style green way through the South Frame connecting Hagley Park back up to Ara, and obviously that's not what we're getting. We're getting very much a few laneways put in, and I think, it's just incredibly disappointing. But this is a good way to acknowledge the local history. This is art as well as heritage, and I just think Sarah had money available for this sort of thing, and they should be funding it, not us.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thanks. Look, this is budgeted for, but I guess it was budgeted for in a budget that I didn't agree with and voted against. I think the point that I want to make is that there are a lot of tangible things in the city that are regularly missing out. So I think it's a big call to jump ahead of those and spend tens of thousands of ratepayer dollars on the intangible via intangible heritage grants. These projects sound nice. I think I do need to acknowledge that. So I don't inherently dislike them, but I just don't believe that it's fair to shake down ratepayers for this. So I'm voting against all of them.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, in that case, I will put them to the vote. I'll do one at a time. Those in favour of motion 1 to Team Hutchinson Ford, say aye, please. Aye. Anyone against?
No.
Okay, so Catherine, James, Yanni, Phil, and Sam.
Yep, thanks.
Are against. Get those recorded, please. Yes, the anti-car brigade. Yep, and yeah. Right. Okay.
Doesn't really distinguish.
So I declare
us.
that one carried. The second one, 25,000 to Aotāwhiti Unlimited Discovery School for the Springbok Tour project. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any against?
No.
So Tim, Phil, James, and Sam. Is that right, Sam?
And Catherine.
And Catherine.
Yeah, I'm against it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Get those ones recorded. And the last, so declare that one carried. Approved grant of $10,000 for the Storytown Heritage Project. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against?
No.
All right, so Phil,
No.
Catherine, Sam, and James.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I declare that one carried. And number 4, the delegation just to do those previously approved ones. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Anyone against? Declare that carried. Thank you very much.